Introducing the remarkable archetype, the dangerous gentleman. With a demeanor that commands respect and a hint of potency, he embodies strength tempered by virtue. Though his capabilities could veer towards danger, he channels his power for noble causes, serving others and safeguarding those in need. Rooted in a profound love for both God and humanity, he navigates life with discipline and purpose. In his presence, one witnesses the harmonious blend of power and benevolence, a testament to the true essence of masculinity. Step into the world of the dangerous gentleman, where strength is wielded for righteousness, and discover a captivating embodiment of honor and valor.
They say that if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. How do you balance that with the idea of taking ultimate responsibility for your own actions? That's what we're going to talk about today on the Dangerous Gentleman podcast. Yes, I am the Dangerous Gentleman. No, I did not give myself that nickname, but I certainly did earn it. Just to get a little housekeeping out of the way, I want to thank everyone who's liked and commented on the content so far, and the people who have shared it. It's starting to gain a little momentum, so I want to encourage you to do the same thing. Give it a thumbs up, comment in the comment section, share it with people, get the information out there. So I don't know who said that quote. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. But I like it. I like it a lot because it describes me in a lot of ways. Because there are times when I want to charge out in front. There are times when I'm willing to take risks and do things that other people aren't. And sometimes I'll get a little ways out there and I'll accomplish some really cool things or interesting things, at least to me. But I always find a boundary. I always find a ceiling that I got to push through. And sometimes I'm able to push through those ceilings. And sometimes I got to look for other people to help me bust through those ceilings. So I can get out there pretty fast by myself, whether it's in business or fitness or health or whatever it is that I'm thinking, even if it's just a thought pattern, I can get way out there by myself. But I got to rely on other people to help me bring me balance, to help bring some firmness, a firm foundation to those thoughts and those things that I'm trying to accomplish. Or else I'm going to get way out there on an island all by myself. And there's a time and a place for that, right? Michael Jordan by himself was an incredibly talented basketball player. But it wasn't until he had a firm, solid team around him that he started to win championships. And that was when his greatness went to another level. But ultimately, if he hadn't been an amazing basketball player to start with, if he hadn't already been the most talented guy on the team, in the league, in the world, with an incredible work ethic and all the other intangibles that came with him, all those other guys around him, it wouldn't have done the same thing, right? Because you had to have him. He was willing to go fast, but it was that team that helped him to go far because he had already won MVPs. He was already considered to be the best player in the league before he won championships, right? That was the fast part. The far part was winning 6 titles in 8 seasons. And that came when he went together. But ultimately, that responsibility, if he hadn't been who he was, then that team wouldn't have been what it was. The same applies to us, right? I have to have the character. I have to have the intangibles. I have to have the drive and the discipline and the stick-to-itiveness to go and do the thing on my own and then bring along the pieces that will help me to go further, and we will go further together because each of us, each of the pieces of the puzzle, each of the pieces of the team are doing what they can do best, right? And this is a lot of what's missing in today's society. We tend to be on one end of the spectrum or the other. Either men especially they're isolated, right? They isolate themselves so they think they have to do it on their own, right? So they have to rely 100% on pulling themselves up by their bootstraps and just knuckling down and getting it done. And there is a time and there is a place for that. But when we do that too much, when that is our entire mode of operation, we're going to get stuck. We're going to hit our limits. We're going to hit our boundaries. And sometimes those boundaries are pretty high. sometimes we can really go a long way on our own in those white knuckle situations. But when we combine that skill, when we combine that ability within ourselves with other people, that's when we can take it to that next level. But ultimately, this is where the responsibility ultimately comes back on us, right? If we're not already that person of high character, if we're not already that person of high drive, if we're not already taking responsibility for our own actions, and then we start to surround ourselves with people, we're just going to be the weakest link. We're just going to be the piece that breaks or that holds everybody else back, or that people are just going to leave behind. That's what often happens. And men tend to either be this driven person who's kind of leading all the way out there in the front, right? And leaving everyone else behind. And that's not good. Or we watch other people and we see them achieving things, so we keep everyone at our arm's length. We keep everyone else out there. And so we feel isolated. We isolate ourselves and we think we have to do it on our own. But we're not that driven person, right? We're not that highly driven person that gets out there and gets the results. We still have big weaknesses in our character. And so we feel isolated because we see all of our weaknesses. We don't see our strengths. There's a danger in relying only on your strengths. There's a danger in leaning only on those things that we do really well. There's also a danger in only operating on our weaknesses. There's a danger in only seeing the negative. There's a danger in beating ourselves up constantly, in focusing on our weaknesses and focusing on all the things that we can't do and giving ourselves all these big long lists of excuses, right? I've recently been talking to a young man. He's from a different part of the world, and he wants help. He wants help. In some ways, he needs help. And so I offer him advice. I make suggestions for how he can do things. And I'm met with a constant barrage of, oh, well, it's not like that. This part of the country, this part of the world is different. We can't do things like that. And the things that I'm telling him are not things that are exclusive to people in the United States. These are principles that you can apply anywhere you are. But all I get back from him is excuses and all the reasons he can't do the things that I'm suggesting. All I'm suggesting him to do is get up early, work hard all day, and take responsibility for his actions. But so often he's just like, hey, can you do this for me? Can you do this for me? Can you answer this question? Can you do this? And I have to tell him, I said, bro, the answers are just as available to you as they are to me. Yes, your part of the world is different than mine, but the same principles apply, right? Being a man is anywhere in the world, the same principles apply. You still have to work hard. You still have to seek out and find those answers for yourselves. I can't answer those questions any better than you can. And you can go seek the answers to those questions just as easily, if not more easily than me, because it's you that's seeking the answers. So I'm not going to help you do the things. This is what boils down to. I shouldn't be doing for other people what they could just as easily do for themselves. And that's where the team is. That's where that aspect of the team comes from, right? Is when you have a weakness that could be shored up by someone else. That's when a team comes in handy. You shouldn't be asking them to do something that you are just as capable of doing. If you are the leader of the group, you should be willing to do any piece of the job that's possible, right? You should be willing. It doesn't mean that you have to. It doesn't mean that you should, but you need to be willing to do the suckiest job. One of the ways that I've heard it put is whoever in charge, whoever leading the operation needs to be able to embrace the most suck. You need to be willing to get down in the proverbial muddy ditch and dig when it's cold and wet and sloppy and dirty, right? You need to be willing to do that. Yes, your talents might be more beneficial to the team in other ways, but you need to be willing to do those things. So be willing to do that. That's where the working together, the going together and going far come in, is when my talents are mixed with your talents and my work ethic is mixed with your work ethic, and we're all willing to work hard. We're all willing to go fast, but we're also willing to slow down and grind a little harder in order to make whatever process it is that we're doing, whatever it is we're trying to accomplish, that much more effective. We need to be willing to come together to make our efforts, make them come to another level, more lasting, more resonating, right? So if you want to go fast, you have to be willing to go fast. You have to be willing to do more and work harder than anybody else. But you also need to realize that when you mix that effort with other people, that's when you're really going to take things to another level and you'll go further. But you're going to have to accept some frustration, maybe of having to slow down a little bit in the short term to mix that with other people. That's kind of where we are in society, is that we've got these people, we have these superficial relationships because we're not willing to enter in. We're not willing to take those relationships to another level, so we feel isolated. And we think we're isolated because we're either living in that no one is on my level, I'm way out here, or no one's on my level, so I'm way back here. And when we realize that so many of us are actually on the same level, especially as men, we suffer the same issues. We all deal with the same garbage. We all deal with the shame. We all deal with these desires. I talked in my masculinity episode about a lot of these things. We all want to be men. We all want to stand up and be strong. That is part of who we are. And when we embrace that, and we're willing to embrace that with other people, we realize that we're not alone, because we're not. We're not. And that's why part of masculinity is having a brotherhood. It's having other men in your life that are going to rein you back when you need to be reined back, and kick you in the butt when you need to be kicked in the butt, but also to lock arms with you when you're trying to get somewhere together and you're combining your efforts to get where you need to go. And that, if you've never had it, if you've never had the opportunity to work with a bunch of men in a situation where you're trying to get something amazing done, I talked about it in my last episode. That group of young people who helped in the city politics, right? We helped to change the course of an election. We did that together, and we will never forget that. It was years ago. Well, in 10 years, in 15 years, 20 years, we're still going to be talking about that because we came together and we formed memories. We literally were chased in the street, people trying to take our picture, people in the middle of the night driving around, flashing their lights at us, trying to take our picture, having our pictures taken from doorbell cameras and all that stuff, right? We will never forget that. And the phone calls that we received from people who were angry, who didn't like what we were doing, that brings us together. Why? Because we have common values, right? We were all trying to achieve the same mission. And so the people that you bring in, when you're trying to go somewhere together, it's really difficult to sometimes, for me anyway, if I'm trying to accomplish something, the go fast part is I'll be like, no one else sees it the same way I do. And so we convince ourselves that we're a lone wolf. But the reality is, like I've said, there are other people who are trying to accomplish the same things. And so you need brotherhoods. And I have levels of brotherhood, right? And they're not all the same brothers in all the same situations. I got guys at the gym that I love to go to the gym, and I love to sweat with, and I love to lift heavy weights, and we like to get after it, listen to some crazy music, and really get after it in the gym. And I need those guys. I need that brotherhood, right? And there are guys that I go to church with that are solid Christian brothers, and we do those kind of things together, and we have those common values, and they push me spiritually, and they push me in my character, and they push me to be a better person. In my business, I have people that push me to be a better chiropractor, to be a better businessman, to be a better coach, right? So I have these different brothers, and they all coach me, and they all push me, and I push them in all of these different areas. And so we need these different brotherhoods, and ultimately, we all form one great big brotherhood because we're all trying to get somewhere. We're all trying to make the world a better place. We're all trying to make our world a better place. And sometimes that's our world, And sometimes that's our world, the bigger world. So find some people with common values. Find some people who love to lift heavy weights. If you're a runner and you like to do like ultra running, find some other people who like to do ultra running and train with them. And they will push you further and faster and harder than you would more than likely on your own. But again, you have to be willing. If you don't have the character in the first place to push yourself, to challenge yourself, to make yourself better, then all those other people around you aren't going to do you any good. Right? So you have to have the internal character first. You have to have the drive and the discipline first in order to really take advantage of those others that are around you. And yes, they can help teach you those things and they can help show you those things. But ultimately, the ultimate responsibility, the final choice is still yours. Because even if you surround yourself with all those great people and they're pushing you, but you don't accept that, or you reject it, or you eventually end up separating or isolating yourself from it, you're just going to end up further back, if not worse, in a worse situation, because you're just going to continue to isolate. Because now you've tried and now you're like, oh, I can't do it. See, I just reinforced the stereotype that I saw in myself of the fat, lazy person, right? Which is how I used to be. And I've had people push me. But ultimately, the choice and the responsibility for where I got to and how I got there is mine. But it's with others that we can actually go further. I only got so far in my fitness and health journey trying to do it on my own. When I start to rely on other people, other coaches, showing me things and teaching me things, that's when things went to another level. But if I hadn't already been willing to go, then I never would have gotten there. I would have never taken their advice. I would have never sought their advice. In overcoming drugs and overcoming alcohol and all of my addictions, right? I had to choose to start going to meetings. I had to start by doing the work of recovery. I had to start that on my own, and I had to have that drive. And I would have gotten so far on my own, right? And I had to have that first. But when I incorporated the use of a sponsor, when I incorporated the 12 steps of Narcotics Anonymous, when I attended meetings and had a home group and started to actually lead meetings myself, that's when my recovery went to another level. When I started to mix my own efforts with other people, with starting to lean on things that were well established and known to work and to be effective, that's when my own efforts became that much more powerful. And so we have to build together. So we have to take these common values, right? We have to find people with common values. For step one is we have to have some sort of drive in ourselves. We have to have a certain level of discipline. That has to come first. We have to be able to take radical responsibility ourselves first. So one is we take radical responsibility for our own self and our own actions. Two is we find other people with common values or common goals that we have to align ourselves with. And then we have to build something together. We have to be willing to come together and give up those pieces of ourselves, that drive that we already had. We need to temper that now with a team. So we have to take personal responsibility, we have to have common values, and then we have to be willing to build something. And we have to agree and know what it is that we're trying to build. And there's some practical steps, right? We have to take practical steps. We have to be willing to seek those people out. First of all, we have to identify what it is we're trying to accomplish. And that sometimes is easier said than done. We have to know what we're trying to accomplish. And most of the time we do. Most of the time, if we just took the time to sit down and write it out, it's right there for us. We know what it is. It's just we haven't made it concrete by writing it down. And pretty soon, once we start to write it down, we're surrounding ourselves with the right kind of people, we're going to find our team. And sometimes that takes more work. Sometimes it just becomes apparent because you're running in a direction to accomplish a certain thing, and all of a sudden you look around and there's other people who are running the same route. And you're like, oh, hey, we're all running this way. Let's run together. So find those people. And then maybe you slow down. You stop running. Maybe you go slow to a jog and you start to talk about it. You start to figure out some strategies. You start to put pen to paper. start to pour the concrete, the foundation for what it is that you're trying to build so that you can get somewhere. But it starts with personal responsibility. It starts with radical responsibility. It starts with owning your own actions. If you don't do that first, then none of this stuff means anything. So start with radical responsibility. That's what I had to do. I had to take, my life fell apart. My life crashed completely. Sleeping in my car, losing my kids, losing everything. I had to start with owning that and taking responsibility for that. It has to start with being willing to go fast alone. And then once you've gotten out of the hole, that's what you have to do. You have to go fast to get out of the hole, right? Because if you're just sitting there and you're just trying to trudge along and you're in that muck, you're not going to get anywhere. So you have to be willing to grab that other gear and go on your own as fast as you can until you find some other people who will help you go further. Start with radical responsibility. Identify those common values. Build a team and identify some steps. Look around you at the other people who are in the same field and go to the same church or work out at the same gym or who go to all the same PTA meetings. Those are the people you want to be mixing your labor with. Look around. Find them. They are there. That's what happened to me. I didn't go seeking a bunch of people who wanted to accomplish all these things. I just was moving in a direction, and then all of a sudden, God brought those people around me. All of a sudden, there they are. And then all of a sudden, the team formed. And we're getting stuff done. And I can't emphasize it enough. It starts with radical responsibility. Own your shit. The rest will come. All right. So once again, if you want to contact me personally, check out my social media profiles down below. And we'll talk to you next time.
So if you like this content, please give it a rating, a review, and share it with your friends. Also, if you'd like to learn a little bit more about me and what I'm all about and what I can maybe do for you, check out my website at thedangerousgentleman.org. That's thedangerousgentleman.org. Thank you for listening.